and I'll give you a full chart of how to be healthy. I'll give you a full chart, diet chart, exercise chart. Morning.
Good morning, sir.
I've just finished with doctor. Okay,
Yeah.
doctor, I'll come back to you on this. Okay. Bye.
Hi, sir.
Yeah, morning.
Morning.
We will continue from where we stopped the other day. Today is 10th April, Good Friday of 2009. And we finished off our last program 10 days back. That day, I skimmed over the whole thing. I sort of went very fast through the whole trajectory of my life. But today I will go into some detail. One of my favorite American presidents, not my favorite earlier, but as I've studied the subject more, is Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower was a 5-star general in the US Army, a hero of the Second World War. And he became president in 1952. He was at the height of his popularity, a Republican, after a long stint of Democratic rule, 4 terms of President Roosevelt, FDR, and 1 term of Harry Truman. And after he left the presidency, Dwight Eisenhower wrote two books. One book was called Waging Peace. I think it's a wonderful title. It's a wonderful title of a book written by an army man who had seen war most of his adult life. And he called the book Waging Peace. Wonderful title. The other book he wrote was At Ease, Stories I Tell to Friends. I think I'll name this talk today At Ease, Stories that I tell to very few people. But coming back to the beginning, I have some wonderful reminiscences of my early childhood. Again, a lot to do with my grandfather and my paternal uncles. During the early part of my life, I was absolutely the apple of their eye. Absolutely the apple of their eye. And two of my uncles were still not married. One got Monokaka. He got married in 1949. He was mostly in our house in Jalpaiguri. And the other two, Pintukaku and Mitukaku, stayed with us in our house in Danda. And I was absolutely their favorite. I was the centerpiece around which their world revolved. Mintukaku had a personal nickname for me. He called me Bakkai. And he left for doing his bar law exam. He went by ship, sailed from Calcutta to England in 1950. I was about 3.5, 4 years old. He wrote me a postcard from the ship about his observations on that long sea journey from India to England. Pintukaku lived on with us in our house in Damdar right up to his marriage. He married very late, in 1961. And he had a wonderful way with children. Not only with me, but my cousins, everybody. He was a wonderful storyteller. But coming back to my grandfather, I continued to be till the end of his life, his absolute favorite. He had a personal tailor in Darjeeling called Kobirmo, and he stitched overcoats for me, etc. by his personal tailor Kobirmo. Apart from that, in Calcutta, my father's tailor was Barkat Ali Brothers. They still have their shop in Park Street. They were the two best tailors in town. One was Ghulam Muhammad on Chorangi Road. The other was Barkat Ali in Park Street. And at that age, I was barely 5-6 years old. My parents stitched me a dinner jacket, a prince coat. They were always particular. My mother, she was very particular about my dress. And Barkat Ali Brothers, whenever I went there for getting my measurements, they called me the prince. I didn't feel very Machiavellian in those days. And my mother used to, she had a whole series of children's clothes books, got many designs, and they used to stitch sweaters for me. In those days we still didn't have many ready-made sweaters like we have today. And she stitched sweaters, cardigans for me. I remember one particular sweater. It was grey color with red penguins sort of going down like this, 3-4 penguins going down like that. It's a wonderful design, one of my favorites. And my mother's immediate younger sister quickly knit the same sweater for her son. Anyway, as I said, the main reminiscences that I have of those days was the absolute the love that was showered on me, not only by my parents, but my grandfather and my paternal uncles. Another event that is very important, which till this day, till my dying day, I will never forget, is one of my maternal cousins. He had a toy car, with pedals and toy cars, and it was maroon colored, and it was a copy of the Triumph. Whenever I went to play at his house, and this car was at his maternal grandfather's house, I really loved that car. And one day I just mentioned to my grandfather, Dada, I love that car. Rameshwar has this car. I wish I could have a car like that. Just mentioned it in passing. And my grandfather went to England in 1952. Spent 6 months there. Stayed with my Mintu Kaku, who was doing his Bharat Law exam. By that time, incidentally, Mintu Kaku had married a German lady who he met in London. And when my grandfather went to England, he came back with a surprise gift for me. He went to the Austin factory, the Austin car factory. He bought a prototype of the Austin A40, the 92 model of the Austin A40. It was white, cream color. It had headlights, it had a horn, it had a dashboard, and it had inflatable tires, not the solid rubber tires. Exactly the prototype of a convertible Austin A40 with a number plate. Even it had a painted number plate, DG100. And there were 3 cars in the Austin factory of that model, that prototype. One which he bought for me was my present, since I had mentioned that I love that Triumph car. The other was for Prince Charles, who was almost my contemporary in age. That was a blue color. And a red colored one, which was bought by an American financier for his son in the US. Now imagine this. I merely mentioned in passing to my grandfather that how I love that card that my cousin used to have. I never asked him for it, I just mentioned in passing that, I love that card. And he made it a point to buy this card, pack it, and ship it. One of its kind, just 3 models, all the way from England to India. That was his extent of his love for me.
That prototype was movable.
Yes, yes. It had battery, headlight, horn, everything. I used to drive it in my compound in 7 times lane.
It's a battery powered.
Battery powered, yes. With inflatable tires. Hubcaps on the wheels. It's a real car on the road. I have photos of it. I wish today for this interview I had brought those the photographs of the car with number plate in the front and back. And the other recollection that I have of my life with my grandfather in Jalpaiguri, that when we sat down for lunch, it was a dining table with about 12 people sitting. Every day lunchtime, not only that lunch table was full, more chairs had to be placed because his friends, acquaintances, neighbors all came for lunch. Cooking was done always for about 30 people because you don't know who would turn up. Maybe 20, maybe 22. Food never ran short. Whether 30 people ate or 36 people sat down for lunch, there was always ample food on the table. When we went for the summer holidays, we stayed for some time in Jalpaiguri, went for the summer holidays to Tagda, 6,000 feet above sea level. Grandfather sent us mangoes, not in kilos, in crates. The mangoes came in small trucks, crates of mangoes for our consumption during our stay in Tagda. And they were wonderful mangoes from Malda. Malda mangoes, how famous they are. I believe they are exported now. So, the primary recollection that I have was this showered by love, affection from my grandfather, parents of course, and my maternal uncles. And as I said earlier in the earlier interview, that I did not stay at all well in those years, right up to my college days. And everybody was worried about my health. We went to so many doctors. My grandfather believed in herbal medicine. He had a personal Koviraj Moshe in Binyatala Lane in Calcutta. Central Calcutta. He took me to Koviraj Moshe. It was Sen, I get his full name. And Koviraj Moshe gave me a lot of herbal medicine, foul tasting, some of them, juice from various herbs, leaves, which I had to have early in the morning. Some are not bad. You had it with honey. There were little sort of round tablets which you crushed in a marble sort of little pot, and you put honey. Those were sweet tasting, wasn't too bad. But none of this helped. None of this really helped. I went on having bad health consisting of weak digestion, fever every 15 days. Every 15 days I was laid up with fever. I missed exams in school, missed classes. And as I said, the padris were not very understanding of this. That's why I gave my comments about my school and St. Xavier's, about the so-called these Jesuit priests. Pretty sadistic. But that continued. And only after I entered college, did my health improve? Through, I would say, willpower and personal intervention. Willpower because of exercise. How important physical exercise is, I realized then, and till this day, I continue with physical exercise. These days, of course, I have a personal gym in the house consisting of treadmill, cross trainer, bicycle. But only after I entered college, I willed myself to better health. But I continued to have one chronic ailment. It started when I was 14 years old, which continued till 6 years back. I was cured only after I went to America. I had asthma, chronic asthma, which was really played up in the winter months in Calcutta. Now I realize it was because of pollution. Calcutta was polluted even in those days, which played up from November till March. Very bad times. Summer months I was always better. But that got cured by the latest medicine only after I went to America as late as 2001. I was almost 55 years old. Now, coming back to those times, school days, and my grandfather, that I related that in some detail. And being the only child, I was also all the time, a lot of attention showered on me by my parents, my father and mother, in two different ways. My mother more concerned about my health, my diet, and my father in his own way, because he was very busy. He was very busy with running the factory. Later on, of course, he got into politics, but that came much later. But in his own way, he showered me with presents. And one revealing feature is, he maintained a diary from his student days till 1980. I don't know why, for what reason. He stopped writing a daily page. It was Sood's Law Diary. Starting from the time of his marriage, 45, 46, when I was born, right up to 1980, every year he bought a Sood's Law Diary and he used to complete one page of his thoughts and his activities of the day. Yeah, as I was saying, that he maintained a diary, anecdotal diary, and every year on 23rd October, my birthday, most of that page was filled up when he wrote about me. How I was his most prized, well, I don't want to say possession, but his thoughts were all about me, and he went on writing as to how he wished I had a life, a life of good health, prosperity, and a life of fulfillment. Every year he went on writing, and that made me realize how much I meant to him. And those diaries were kept very faithfully by me till the other day in a steel trunk. But then I decided to sort of bind them, and when we go down to my other office room, I'll show you how they are bound and kept. And he went on maintaining the diary right up to 1980, and somehow stopped in the middle of 1980 when he had his foreign assignments, starting with his being a delegate to the UN General Assembly in 1980, and the subsequent year when he was appointed as ambassador to Turkey. Now, the other feeling that I had when I was young, visiting my grandfather in Jalpaiguri. But somehow I had this realization that that we were much more wealthy. God had been much kinder to us than most of the people that we knew, than our other relatives. My grandfather had this personal car, apart from his other vehicles, his personal dark blue Ford Custom, very well sprung car. And he had two drivers, one was Mohan and another driver was Kali. Usually Mohan drove the Ford. And I drove with him from Jalpaiguri to Siliguri, from Siliguri to Alipurduar. And we drove miles. And both sides of the road was our land. He pointed out to me that, Babu, this is our land, that side, that's our land, miles and miles. And there were jot. And from the jot, he got dates. So we had date juice in the morning, which was strained because a lot of insects fall on it and all that. So it was strained, it was cleaned, and it was a delicacy in the winter months in Jalpaiguri to have that date juice. And then around 1959, my parents got friendly with a person called MC Ray. MC Ray lived in Calcutta, in a pretty spacious flat in Harrington Mansion. And I got the feeling that he was a little more wealthy than we were. I didn't know at that time. His all show of wealth, etc., was all a house of cards, hollow inside. But the cars that he had, and the kind of life that he led, and the foreign trips that he took twice a month, I got the impression this guy is wealthier than us. And the funny thing is, it's a coincidence in my life that many years later, when I bought my plot of land in New Road, in Alipur, MC Ray had tried to bid for that same plot of land, but he couldn't buy it. Didn't have the money. And I was able to buy it. I got into the business in 1967 at the age of 20. And within 1 year, I bought that land. Of course, prices had come down thanks to the first UF government when there was flight of capital from Bengal. Our price that was quoted at 40,000 a kata 1 year before, during the communist regime, had come down to 27,000 rupees a kata. And I bought that plot of land which MC Ray was bidding for. And the fellow just didn't have that kind of money. He had, with a lot of fanfare, he had started a factory in Santragachi in Howrah with German collaboration to build wagons for the Indian Railways. And not one wagon was manufactured in his factory. The whole thing was a shell. He had taken the government for a ride. Steel had been bought on quota, government controlled rates, which he had sold in the open market, for which the government raided his factory. And it was just a house of cards. And one lesson that I learned, not so much from this incident, but from various, something that had been instilled in me by family, that always be truthful and always be honest. That's how you build credibility. Today I bank with 15 banks. The banks are at my door because of my creditworthiness. And that is something they have in America called a FICA score. In their computer records about an individual, through the social security number, they maintain a record about your credit worthiness, whether you pay your bills on time, and they maintain this score about your credit worthiness. Unfortunately, we don't have that in India, and as recent events show in America, they didn't take it too seriously because they gave loans to all and sundry, thereby landing the banks and the country and the world economy in this huge financial mess. But coming back to this person, MC Ray, because there was lack of honesty from the start, he came to a sad end. He got involved in a lot of court cases, a lot of cases from banks, from his creditors. And in January of 1971, he was lost in a sea of court cases. And at the age of 51, he died of a heart attack in a courtroom in the Calcutta High Court. Very sad. Where his prosecution lawyer, by again a quirk of fate, was Manjula Ghosh, my wife's maternal aunt, later to be wife's maternal aunt, who became a judge of the Calcutta High Court later, appointed during her brother's time. He was the chief minister, just about as he was about to demit office. So that taught me, apart from what was instilled into me by family tradition, as to how important it is to be truthful, to be honest, to be upright. All these virtues stand you in very good stead. And as I said, I bought that same plot of land that he was eyeing at the age of 21. And my parents were very gracious to buy the plot in my name, although I was 21 years old, just barely into adulthood. Because those were the days of the dreaded estate duty, death duty as it was called. And they said ultimately the plot would be mine, the property would be mine anyway. So why not have it in my name from the word go, so that I would not be burdened with estate duty later. But I'll again come back to that. So those school years, etc., were two things: concern for my health by my immediate family, parents and grandfather and uncles, and health not improving at all, troubled me right through my school years. Now, coming back to college years, etc., which and the business years, they were sort of juxtaposed. The college years from 63 to the business years in Calcutta up to December 1970, there was a continuum. And the continuum was the evolving political situation in Bengal, which sort of juxtaposed my college years, the running of the factory, and my changing base from Calcutta to Delhi after 14th of December 1970. Now, let's get back to 63-64, when I had just joined college. The historic split at the international level and at the national level in India took place of the communists. The split between Soviet Russia and Communist China. Two big powers, both communist, finally splitting on ideological grounds. It had its ramifications immediately in India, when the Communist Party of India split. From the parent body, the Communist Party of India, Marxist, was formed, aligning with China, whereas the Communist Party of India, the parent body, continued to be aligned with Soviet Russia. And what was the ground of the split? The ground of the split was that the Communist Party of India, according to the Communist Party of India, Marxist, was that the parent body had given up the theory of total revolution and had become a participant of parliamentary democracy, which went against the tenets of orthodox communism. They had this huge rally in Calcutta at the Brigade ground, where officially the Communist Party of India, Marxist, was launched. And for some time, one man who was to be a central figure in Bengal politics later, Jyoti Basu, vacillated for a couple of months whether he would stay with the parent party or he would join hands with the party, with the group that had spun off. And obviously his political instincts were sound, because after debating to himself, he finally joined the Communist Party of India, Marxist, which became the more powerful of the two parties. Now, when this happened, they continued to be both continued to oppose the Congress, although from two different flanks. The CPM was more vociferous. The CPI was a little less vociferous by the time Mrs. Gandhi had come round, because Mrs. Gandhi already started making sounds about, always maintained a pro-Soviet policy, which sort of endeared her to the CPI. People like S.A. Dange, Bhupesh Gupta were very close to her. And her, as later events would show, she really aligned the country with the Soviets. Now, when in 1967, that watershed election that I talked about in detail in my last interview, that happened, one very important thing took place. The precursor of which I saw in Presidency College itself. That was, CPM had been formed. The main purpose of its existence was not to participate in parliamentary democracy, not to participate in elections, but to go for total revolution. But gradually, they veered away from this, so that many of the so-called intelligentsia and from the rural areas, from the peasant movement, they got disillusioned. And it had its ramifications in Presidency College itself, where one man became prominent called Ashim Chatterjee, Kaka. Kaka became later an important leader of the Naxalite movement. He became a good friend of mine, because I was always interested in these developments, saw it from very close quarters, studied it. I was both friendly with Ashim Chatterjee Kaka, who was an extremist, and Sudarshan Rai Chaudhary, who was the leader of the SFI, the student wing of CPM, who is the Minister of Higher Education today in Government of West Bengal. There was constant fight and tussle, spilling over onto the roads, stoning of buses and trams between the SFI, the student wing of CPM, and the so-called extremists who still had not got the name Naxalites. That came about in 1967. So that in 1967, when CPM participated in the elections, not only participated, Congress became a minority, as I said, 127 in the House of 280. They entered the government, their MLAs became ministers, through the total disillusionment of this extremist wing, who claimed, and to a certain extent rightly so, that we formed the party on the basis of total revolution, and you have joined the government, participated in parliamentary democracy. You are enjoying the fruits of office. So the CPI-ML was formed, the Naxalites, started from Naxalbari in North Bengal, and that movement continued. That movement flourished even today. Even today, a huge chunk of territory running through the heart of India are under the grips of different forms of Naxalite movement. Somewhere it's called the People's War Group, somewhere it's called the MCC, the Maoist Coordination Committee. And 40% of the heart of India is under the grip of this movement. Although Chairman Mao has gone, China is today a capitalist country with one-party rule. So that was an event that took place, which had its repercussions, ramifications, till today. Anyway, one of the favorable offshoots of that movement later, and subsequent to my attack by the Naxalites, was it gave a spurt to my expansion plans out of West Bengal. I built up the factory in Ghaziabad. That's my factory. This photograph of Capital Paper Mills in Ghaziabad. And I'll talk in some detail about how the events unfolded leading up to the 1967 elections, where to a certain extent Mrs. Gandhi was to blame for the defeat of the Congress, a very narrow defeat. And there was the food movement in West Bengal during Chief Minister P.C. Sen's time. You know, India still had a food shortage. The Green Revolution was in its beginnings. It hadn't taken place. And India had a food deficit. And suddenly, 66, price of rice, price of wheat, etc. had gone up. The public distribution system was also a little disturbed. And there were food riots on the streets of Calcutta. Now, Jyoti Basu took the opportunity to rush to Bengal, met Prime Minister Mrs. Gandhi, who had just taken office, and came back to Calcutta after his meeting with her in Delhi, that he had got more grains from the central pool for West Bengal. He made that false claim that was done. It was all done by Mr. P.C. Sen, the Chief Minister. He came back and made that false claim that I did what the Chief Minister should have done. Mrs. Gandhi shouldn't even have granted him audience, so that he couldn't have come back and made that false claim. But that's what happened. To a certain extent, that cut the ground from under the feet of Mr. P.C. Sen, God's good man. And the 67 elections happened. And I have, in my earlier interview, I have spoken in detail about that. And the two UF governments, one of 1967, the other of 1969, utter disasters. And the bad times of West Bengal started from then, 67. And we are today in 2009. 67 to 2000, that's 33 years and another 9 years. 42 years. 42 years have passed. And West Bengal is still hasn't seen good times. It ended with the reign of Dr. B.C. Roy and continued into Mr. P.C. Sen. There was an opportunity, a golden opportunity in 1972 when the Congress R, after the split took place, it was Congress O and Congress R. Mrs. Gandhi's government was called Congress R in those days, Congress Requisitionists. That government came into power under still somewhat dubious conditions, because the elections gave it a brute majority and there were only 14 CPM MLAs. Congress had a brute majority of 216 members in a house of 280. The opposition claimed, I don't know, it's still controversial, that the election was rigged. They boycotted the assembly from 72 to 77, and Mr. Siddharth Shankar Ray became the chief minister. Now, this was a time of missed opportunities for West Bengal. And the man to blame was S.S. Ray. S.S. Ray he had always been in state politics. In 71 he contested parliament for the first time, got elected from Raigad. That was the same year that my father was defeated by a narrow margin of about 800 odd votes. And just after my Naxalite attack, that election of 71. And after he was elected, by that time my father was living in a house called in number 2 Circular Road in Chanukyapuri in Delhi. One of the best houses of any central minister, which my father came to know by accident. In his second stint, he had the portfolio of works, housing and urban development. And Mr. S.K. Banerjee of Ministry of External Affairs, who was ambassador to Japan, had come back as Secretary External Affairs, came to my father, who was still living in number 17 Murti Marg, and said, Mr. Ghosh, there are 2 houses in a place called Circular Road. My father didn't even know where it was. It's a small little road, not like Circular Road of Calcutta. Only four houses. And he said that those 2 houses are occupied by the Ford Foundation. You can bring it to the central pool, and I am entitled to a type 8 house. Can you allot me number 1 Circular Road? So my father got interested and went and had a look at the house. It was a double-storied house, unlike all type 8 houses, which are usually single-storied. Beautifully appointed, because it was occupied by Ford Foundation. They had left all the kitchen equipments, many drapes, etc., intact as it was. And he liked the house so much that he said, Mr. Banerjee, I am taking number 1 Circular Road. And you can take number 2 Circular Road later, because that was taking a little more time to be vacated by Ford Foundation. By that time the elections were announced, midterm elections, government had fallen, become a minority government thanks to its loss in parliament on the Privy Purse issue which I spoke about earlier. And during the campaign, my father was so confident about being re-elected. While he was campaigning, he shifted from number 1 circular road to number 2 circular road. He should have waited until the election results were out. But he was so confident of his victory that in the midst of the election, we shifted from number 1 to number 2. Anyway, a month and a half later, the results were out, my father had lost. And many of his friends were interested in that house, his close friends, like V.C. Shukla, K.C. Pant, or Raja, as my father called him by his nickname, even I.K. Gujral. But S.S. Ray and his wife came and met us, and he said, Porival, why don't you give us this house? And my father thought two things. First, he thought, let it go to a Bengali. And the other thing, S.S. Ray by that time had become sort of all-powerful in the West Bengal Congress. He was a member of the working committee. He had been elected. He had become a cabinet minister. He was close to Mrs. Gandhi. So my father thought, well, let it go to him. Hope we'll remember this gesture for later on. Well, he didn't. He didn't.